Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Discog Breakdown. As always, I am joined by my partner in crime, Jake. Jake,
It's me, Jake.
how about you romance the audience a little bit? Let's hear those golden pipes.
I will not be doing that today, Alex. However, we do have a special guest on this podcast
Thank you,
today
Jake.
with us,
Joining
who
us
will grace you
today
with his voice.
is a very, very special guest, Mighty Matty Mo, swole and jacked founder of the Indieheads podcast, grand provisioner of the National Dudes Rock Ration, and, most importantly, founder of international hit sensation podcast Slam Me Harder, Daddy. Matty?
Hi everybody, what's going on? It's me, Matthew Monroe, the host of the hit podcast Slam Me Harder, Daddy, episode 2. It'll come out eventually. All right.
I want to come on Slam Me Harder, Daddy. I haven't watched a single episode of wrestling, nor have I even watched a full clip of wrestling, but I would still like to come on Slam Me Harder, Daddy.
Honestly, that'd be a lot of fun. Like I said, because I would just show you. Like I said, I'd show you a couple matches and we talk about them. And I think you'd have a good time. It's a bunch of, hot, sweaty men, slamming against each other. There's good storytelling there.
I think
they're hunks.
I think the biggest terror there is that I'd actually get into it.
See, that's the fear of wrestling, is that like if you find the really good stuff, I mean, you're in trouble because so much of it is bad, but the stuff that's really good is like really fucking good, and it is absolutely terrifying. But we're not here to talk about the hunks in the squared circle. We're talking about the hunk from Anacortes, Washington, Mr. Phil Elverum.
That is true. That is true, folks. Today we're talking about No Flashlight, which is the first proper album released under the Mount Eerie moniker. Not the first thing total, but like the first full length LP album, No Flashlight.
Some of his nicest album art packaging on the 2015 reissue too.
Yeah,
just
yeah,
some really
I agree.
Beautiful photographs posted on it. It's very gloomy. There's a picture of both Genevieve and Phil in the spread. And this was, in fact, the first album that he put out after they met, and she is on it.
Yeah, her vocals show up here and there on some of the songs.
And for those who don't know, she would go on to be on like most of his albums from here on. At least any of the ones with any sort of background vocals. She's not on Dawn.
No.
But
no, she's on Clear Moon and Ocean Roar, I think, for sure.
She is on Sauna.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah. Some interesting stuff on this No Flashlight. On this No Flashlight here, folks. Yeah, a lot of just a lot of weird things kind of going on. I feel like we said on the Mount Eerie episode, Mount Eerie the album, that was one of his more like sonically unique albums, and that it's kind of hard to compare it to other things he or really anyone has released. But I think that you could sort of say the same thing about this album. It is sort of a very singular experience in and of itself.
I think it's kind of the other side of the coin in a way. It's like sonically, it is very different. It feels different to listen to this album, but just the way he was writing these songs and their structure and stuff does actually bear some similarity to the Mount Eerie album.
Yeah, well, right. I was thinking that like if there's one album that they both can be compared to, it's sort of like each other in a way.
Absolutely.
Well, what's a good place to start on this thing? Let's go around the circle. What's everybody's favorite song on No Flashlight?
Ooh, I hadn't even thought about this.
Ooh, let's see. I'll go as the special guest of the Phil Elverum Discog Breakdown. I'm between two songs. I'm gonna say that my favorites are either The Moan or The Universe Is Shown. The Moan, because I do like it. Like I said, Samurai Sword is my favorite. It's not my favorite track on the Glow Part 2, but it's like top 3, top 4 for me on the Glow Part 2. I think it's great.
Yeah.
And then the universe is shown because, like I said, it's Phil Elverum. He's literally just banging pots and pans and then obnoxiously playing a trombone.
And I'm just like, it when he gets to be a noisy lad.
And I'm just like, this speaks deeply to me. And also, this is it's in my notes. It kind of feels like a proto Idler Wheel track. Like some of the sounds feel very Idler Wheel-esque.
I actually compared it to an On Avery Island song, which I think Alex brought up a similar comparison on one of our earlier episodes. It's definitely the trombone and
I compared it to the drums by Microphones.
I like the Idler Wheel comparison, though. It is just a wacky song. Like, it's a wacky song by itself, but it's also kind of a wacky song in context on this album, because the whole thing is like this very nocturnal, somber, like, I don't know. It's like, it's kind of slow moving and spacey and drony, and then all of a sudden you get this weird, like, fucked up carnival dirge, and you're like, oh, okay, like, I can get behind this.
Yeah. I also do like the Idler Wheel comparison, because that album also does a lot of kind of weird and jarring things with its fairly normal instruments that you'd have trouble hearing somewhere else.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Idler Wheel retrospect coming to a theater near you someday, folks.
Someday. It's
hard
like
to say
15th in line at this point. Yeah.
I do think it honestly could have been our top 10 if more people had discovered it earlier in the decade. Because I discovered it last year. I finally listened to it and I was just like,
same.
I was just like, it was one of those albums where you instantly are just like, this is really gonna fuck up my album of the decade rankings. Like,
right.
It's just like, okay, this is just an unfathomably great album. Like, off just one listen, you're just like, oh god. It's like whenever I revealed that I listened to it for the first time, I posted the image of Tim Robinson in the Fully Loaded Nacho sketch from I Think You Should Leave, where he's just like overreacting to getting caught in this lie, and I'm just like what? Like, oh god, like, what is this album? But I think Rose also got into it, and she was also just like, oh no. And so I think it could have been our top 10, but like I said, the Idler Wheel retrospective, it is on the docket. I can't, no dates. I will never confirm a date for that episode, but it's one that we want to do. We have to do the Born to Run retrospect podcast first.
We have the team for it. We have the supplies. We just have to do it. Going back to your question,
Best Picture nominee Born to Run.
This is true. Snubbed every single year by the just heathenish Academy Awards, but we know we'll win it someday, folks. Born to Run, Best Picture, Bruce Springsteen, Best Director, Sound Design, the works. Gonna sweep someday.
And speaking of sound design, the music of Phil Elverum, and especially this album, is filled with a lot of great sound design throughout.
Lots of great sound design. Yes. I would agree. Just to go back, since you mentioned, just to touch on your other favorite song here, being The Moan. I think this is the first metal song that Phil ever made, which, you know, obviously not the first song with like heavy guitars on it.
He's got like this is like a whole ass guitar solo, and it's very normal. It's not a weird guitar solo, and that in and of itself is very weird to hear on a Phil Elverum album.
It's like, I don't know, it's like a straight up heavy metal guitar lick, like not even in a weird experimental way. It's like this is like a real metal song, and it's like, I don't know, it is kind of hard to get used to Phil's voice behind this sort of backdrop. It's just a weird juxtaposition of things, because it's like he's the soft folk man, and now he's like shredding it on the guitar. Like, I'm just imagining him in just like a stadium, like it's like Zakk Wylde strumming the guitar until his like fingers are bleeding kind of thing.
Imagine Phil in like full like Kiss getup, rocking a goddamn like football arena.
Imagine Phil with like 15-inch long hair, just like wearing like spiky shoulder pads and like leather black pants.
Mascara running.
Obviously.
Is Genevieve, is she Norwegian or
No,
am I getting that wrong?
she's French Canadian.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought it's the name that filled me. I was gonna be like, and like I said, meets one person from Norwegia and then gets really into black metal.
Norwegia.
Norway.
You heard it here first, folks. Norway, please step down. You know who you truly are.
That's actually like a genuinely good point though that I've never considered, is that like Phil did truly start making black metal music after having lived in Norway for an extended period of time, and I don't think that those two things are unrelated. Like that's a genuine connection that I could see having happened in real life.
Yeah, sure.
See, you thought I said something stupid, and I said something stupid, but you could translate it to something smart and real.
Something stupid inside of something smart.
And that's why I was invited onto this podcast, because that's what I'm here to bring. I'm here to bring you just the dumbest shit possible, but occasionally I'm very enlightening, and sometimes you just have to. You just have to wait for it. Sometimes I'll say the thing that's really enlightening, and then you just gotta wait for it, because in between I'll say shit like, I'll say shit like, what if instead of Washington it was washing men, but it was just for the fellas?
Oh my god. All right.
That's the exact sort of insight we were missing.
Perfect transition. My favorite songs on this album, I think, are "I Hold Nothing" and "In the Bat's Mouth."
All right, hell yeah.
I love the kind of. You can speak first, Jake. Actually.
Wait, what was the? Okay, you said "I Hold Nothing"
and "In the Bat's Mouth."
In the Bat's Mouth. I'll just talk about "I Hold Nothing," because that's what I would have said for my favorite song on the album. I agree with you. I mean, it's sort of hard to explain this album because it's a very like dense and like philosophical in a way that's sort of like hard to wrap my head around. Like as far as the themes go, it's like I don't know. There's a lot of talking about nothing and emptiness and like not being.
Well,
but it's also like
I think it was very much grappling with the questions of Mount Eerie still that he kind of posed on Mount Eerie. And to me, "I Hold Nothing" is the most quintessential Mount Eerie album track on this record. And
definitely.
Yeah, I probably part of why I like it so much. That's a really fucking good album, folks.
It is, and specifically for "I Hold Nothing." Well, first of all, actually, I should mention that "I Hold Nothing" was the song that Lanterns like turned into. I think I mentioned that on one of our earlier episodes.
Oh, that makes sense to me. I see that.
So like some of the melody and so like as far as why I like it, like I think the song is just sonically very beautiful. It like starts out really kind of loud and abrasive and drony, and then it goes into this nice little acoustic thing. But yeah, I mean, again, it's sort of I don't know. A lot of this stuff is like Phil singing to the void or some shit that I don't really fully grasp. But I did find a good Phil quote actually that's sort of. It's not necessarily about this album, but it's about like kind of the themes of him like repeatedly asking in his music like what Mount Eerie means. And I'll just read I'll read an abridged version of the quote that I made because it's kind of long. But I think it says a lot of interesting things about that I think are relevant to this album. So he says, so the question is like, what does Mount Eerie mean? And he's like, well, for one thing, a sense of place is lacking in most of our American lives in art and music and everything. Everyone moves around so much. Kids grow up in 5 different places and return to nowhere. Towns are all generic because if everyone is going to move soon, who cares if it's an Olive Garden or something more permanent feeling? The lack of home that most people feel is fucked. We have a shallow history, especially on the West Coast, and it's getting shallower. The mountain, Mount Eerie, is right in the middle of the island. It has this distinctive, dramatic rock face. It's almost like the mascot of this place. I grew up under it, staring at it every morning, waiting for the school bus. It's a special place for me, and the mysterious beauty in the rock face is potent. So
I think that digs into a lot of what this album looks at in a really succinct and elegant way. He's very much grappling with kind of having a sense of place and also finding meaning within his art, which kind of really makes sense as this being the album in which he transitioned into the name Mount Eerie on.
Yeah, right. And like you sort of get the sense when listening to his music that, you know, it's not necessarily about Mount Eerie, like the mountain, but it is sort of, I don't know, that's definitely a landmark to him in his life in general. It's sort of like at the center of things, and it's kind of always present entity in his music in a way. Yeah.
Grounding, which that the Mount Eerie album was the Earth album.
Yeah, true.
Connection there.
That is true. But yeah, like what was I gonna say? There's just like one more little line to the quote here where he's like, some places have a mountain that's always on the horizon. Maybe for some people it's a grain silo, maybe a tree, maybe a flat field, maybe an apartment building, the iconic mascot of a place that is home. So, yeah. I'll just like, this is one of those things that's like, a lot of the lyrics on this album, I was reading through them today and they're sort of impenetrable to me, and I'm like kind of just like reading over them and trying to wrap my head around it. So I'm like, here's a Phil quote that explains it better than I can.
Good summation of this series in general so far.
Yeah, right.
He has said a lot of elegant things about his work and in his work, and that's, you know,
this is true.
Why we're doing this.
I mean, folks, let me tell you, I'm in this podcast. I'm into Phil because my man is very good at making me go, ow, that hurt, ouch. And I think No Flashlight has a lot of his most ouchy moments.
I'd agree.
I think it's a very self-defeating album. It's very self-critical of not only like of the music of the microphones in Mount Eerie, but also just of Phil himself. He very much is going through the ringer throughout this record. There's not many places of hope or anything like that. It's a very just dark, dismal record that, from reading some of the reviews at the time, people were not ready for it. Like, this album is just people were not really, you know, wanting this album from Phil at this point in time.
I would argue that even to this day, like if you look at his actual like studio, like full length LPs, this is probably the least popular one or the least talked about one. Maybe like, honestly, no, I think this is the one that sort of, if I had to like rank them in terms of like critical popularity, this would probably be in last place. Honestly, it doesn't really get a lot of due respect.
Maybe I don't feel like I see anyone talk about Don't Wake Me Up, but this album is substantially better than Don't Wake Me Up, so
I would agree with that as well.
So you can weigh that however you want.
Another thing I kind of wanted to bring up at some point was, I know that we've sort of been talking about how they're technically, like, you can make a distinction between the work of Mount Eerie and the microphones just in terms of how it sounds and kind of the ethos behind it and like how it was made and like with the people it was made with. But this album, like in terms of how it sounds, I can sort of still feel the microphones. Like, I can feel that transition happening. Like, this album is still very evocative of, like, it sounds like the Glow Part 2 and like Mount Eerie in a lot of ways. It's kind of like, I think I called it, it's like the Glow Part 2 night mode. It's
this is
got
a kind of very transitional album.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, because it sounds like the microphone stuff, but the I would say the thematic content is a lot more sort of obtuse and like enigmatic in a way that characterizes more the Mount Eerie side of things.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I don't know. It's still like simultaneously kind of weird to call this a transitional album because what comes next is nothing like this at all.
Yeah, right.
Especially like wasn't like Dawn and Lost Wisdom next chronologically.
Yeah, and technically
Yeah.
Dawn had already been written at this point.
Yeah, and those are just straight up acoustic albums.
Exactly. Yeah, this is much like closer to the sort of Wind's Poem, Clear Moon type of stuff he would go on to do, which was like 5 or so years after this. So.
I mean, I was gonna say to expand on the what I said about like. I think what I said about I Know No One and really just about the entire record. I mean, I think up until maybe A Crow Looked at Me, this is probably one of his most devastating records yet, because on a lot of these songs, his voice, it's so small sounding, it's so small and quiet, like to the point where it just feels like he can't even bring himself to sing on a lot of these tracks. But it's in a very good way. But I think like that feeling is maybe why I think people were turned off to this record. At first was the fact that it seemed like, on the surface, it's just like, okay, well, why is Phil making this album? He clearly is in a weird state where he's not really confident in himself. And, it's one thing to discuss that musically, but it's starting to affect the music itself, if that makes any sense. It's like, okay, it's one thing to talk about in the lyrics, but it feels like it's starting to affect the music too. So, like, what's going on here? Although I do think they work, toe in toe, and I think, like, it adds to why I really like this record so much and why it's one of my favorite like Phil album releases in general, because also it's one of the only Phil album releases I've heard in general. as I have not gone through his behemoth discography.
Which ones have you listened to?
In full, I have heard The Glow Part 2, this album, Mount Eerie, A Crow Looked at Me, Now Only, and Lost Wisdom Part 2.
Okay.
Those are the ones I've heard so far.
So, just out of curiosity, like, what made you listen to, like, this album in particular? Like,
I don't know if I don't fully remember. I think it was either just, like, I kind of wanted to go through the Mount Eerie discography chronologically, and I just gave up on it after this album for some reason. Right. Or I think Alex, you might have just told me to listen to this. I'm not sure. I feel like I either want to do this on my own, or someone in the podcast, probably Alex, told me I should listen to this record. Even though I think I'd already listened to Glow Part 2, and I've already listened to A Crow Looked at Me at this point. But I decided to go to No Flashlight for some reason. I think the album cover is what drew me in. I was like, okay, this is interesting.
That doesn't feel wrong to me, but it also seems wrong because I had not spent much time with this album before this week. I definitely listened a few times, but yeah, I never really dug into it until now. So maybe it was just some sort of mystical universe bullshit that pushed you onto this album.
Honestly, it could have been that, because like I said, that's how I found out about Dean Blunt. I literally was just like, something told me to search Dean Blunt on Spotify, and then boom, here we go. It's Redeemer is my favorite album of all time, and then black metal shortly after.
Speaking of Dean Blunt, someone I know who's in one of my classes played me a black metal song without me realizing it, and I really liked it.
Ooh.
Actually. I was like,
I'm not sure which
who
black
is
metal
this?
song it was.
And he was like, oh, this is Dean Blunt. And I was like, what? That's
literally okay. I have been trying to convince some of you motherfuckers to actually.
I tried listening to the Redeemer once, and I just wasn't into it at the time. So I never came back.
Yeah.
This is gonna sound kind of nuts, but stick with me on this. The Redeemer, I think post Uncut Gems, there's a lot to unlock about the Redeemer. I don't know how to fully articulate why I'm saying this, but there's like parallels that I noticed in my most recent listen of the Redeemer that I'm like, okay, if you really liked Uncut Gems, you might understand this album just like a little bit more.
I don't know how to explain. Dude's rock manifesto for the world.
You just have to trust me on this. But in general, I mean, if you like I said, I think like I said, black metal is great, and I do think like if you like that song, you'll probably like the rest of the record. Although it's the midpoint is definitely where there's potential to tap out because it does the dreaded mistake of putting we're gonna put like these two ambient pieces right in the middle of the album. But I think it works. It does them well compared to like other records that try to do the ambient centerpiece. But anyways, we're talking about Phil Elverum. We're talking about No Flashlight.
Before we move back to what we're supposed to be talking about, the song that he played for me had it sampled strings from I think like a Big Star song or what?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Which one is
intro,
that?
It's the album's intro.
Okay.
So it's the first song on the record.
Pretty fucking cool.
Dean Bone is really fucking good.
He's those strings.
He's again, I think he's one of the most underrated samplers. I think he's done a lot of really unique sampling work over his career. I mean, he's able to take like some of these big pop songs and like repurpose them in such a unique way that they're not unrecognizable, but it takes you a second to realize what the sample is. Like I think the Redeemer, there's some Kate Bush samples, there is a Fleetwood Mac sample, there's a Pink Floyd sample in the mix. The fact that the album is still on like Spotify and shit is like kind of blows my mind because like holy shit, if he tried putting that album out now, he would get fucking sued. He would get sued into oblivion. But like I said, 2013 was different times. No, the Redeemer.
Oh, okay.
Black Metal's also been a couple of interesting samples, and not as much because it's on a label. Because he wasn't able to get away with as much.
Yeah.
But still, he's very, like I said, very unique samples he uses on a lot of the songs.
Remember when Frank Ocean couldn't perform his American Wedding version of Hotel California?
The Eagles, Hotel California.
Yeah.
I hate the fucking man. I hate the fucking Eagles. God. I feel like there was a time where my dad was watching that documentary like multiple times. I can't confirm that, but the whatever the Eagles documentary is, I feel like I have caught him watching that more than once. Like I could tell that it was a rewatch. It wasn't that he was watching like
Big
it wasn't that
energy.
It was long. It was that like it was that he was watching it for a second or third time.
All right.
I know these things.
You know what I love about In the Bat's Mouth?
Yes. Please go on ahead.
The reason this song is such a draw for me, and I genuinely find it kind of like there surely must be a better term for this, but kind of like addicting. Like I cannot stop thinking about the awkward and off-time vocal layering he did with his and Juvia's vocals. It fucking, at first I didn't like it, and then it was like, I just want this to be on every song I listen to for the rest of my life.
You know what it reminds me of is it reminds me of The Mansion on the Glow Part 2 because specifically because of those background vocals that like they don't fit right. Like there's like a song happening which in and of itself is sort of creepy. It's got like a creepy piano and like creepy drums, but then there's like these background vocals that they're just like sort of talking and not singing, and it's not in rhythm with the song, but for some reason it just fits extremely well. Just like with the sound design and everything, it just is like just makes a really kind of interestingly creepy atmosphere. I keep calling it creepy, which it is. So,
eerie. It is eerie.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
Eerie is definitely a better term.
Yeah, I agree.
This is continuing Phil's hot streak of doing things that are generally considered objectively wrong, but somehow works amazingly and
yes,
occupies and owns my brain space for some time.
So here's an interesting thing that I think we should talk about at some point is the two lakes, two mountains, two moons interludes. It's sort of, I mean, he does this a lot where like there'll be a motif or like a kind of melody line that shows up in multiple places on the album, but this is like actually three distinct tracks that follow the exact same like verse structure and everything. And I don't know, I just think that they're all cool, and I like how they sort of they build on each other, even though they're not right next to each other. Like Two Lakes is one thing, and then Two Mountains adds to Two Lakes, and then Two Moons sort of adds to Two Mountains. This is a cool thing.
I agree. Sorry, I knocked some shit over in my room, and that was Alright, I am just going to unplug my laptop. Apologies.
No, you're good.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like the lyrical kind of motif is like there's these two things, and one of them is like cool and popular and everybody knows about it and goes there, but it sucks. And then there's the other one that's like secret and no one knows it, but it's better.
I mean, motherfuckers, they be talking about, oh, there's only two genders. Motherfuckers, there's only two mountains out there. Let me tell you that.
But hey, there's two moons.
Yeah.
Also.
And the first moon is fucking horse shit.
Yeah, okay. It's like,
Fuck
let me
the
just
first moon.
Let me just read
the first
lyrics.
moon was created by Stanley Kubrick in a Hollywood studio in the 1960s. But the second moon, now that's real.
Oh my
That's
god,
real.
Phil is literally a moon landing conspiracy theorist. Let me read the lyrics to this, and you decide for yourselves, America. There are two moons. The one that everyone knows is a reflection in a bucket wearing clothes, because we see reflections. The second moon is actually the moon. Yeah, it's true. Moon landing, fake. All of them. All of them fake.
The moon landing was fake. This is actually the first time you're hearing this conspiracy theory.
And then
no one else has considered this. We are breaking this issue.
okay.
Do you guys think that Phil Elverum has any opinions on on Jeffrey Epstein?
Oh God.
Wait, what is this joke
there
again?
Are
I
two
can't remember.
Jeffrey
This
Epstein.
is not a joke. This is
The
not
one
really a
that
joke.
everyone
This is
knows.
No, you made a Jeffrey Epstein pun related to Mount Eerie before the call started.
Did I?
What was it? Yeah.
I think I don't know if I don't think I made a Jeffrey Epstein pun. I might have. Well, I had a joke. Instead of Mount Eerie, it was called Count Eerie, and it was a Sesame Street crossover for his daughter with the Count. You know, if I had the clout, I'd pull that off.
We are off the fucking rails.
Wait, let me
This is why you invite me on the podcast, because I you know those rails that you put down, you put it down, they put it down real hard, real tough. I come in, I break them up. I talked about
You're bringing some real
just
wrestling
sabotaging
energy,
us.
just walking into the arena and screaming, "You can't contain me," and flexing your enormous jacked muscles.
Or I'll not contain you.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. Okay, let me talk about the moon first.
With lengthy
second.
talks, I'll not contain you. With climbing arms, I'll reach my loft. Through rotting skin, I'll leave my coffin. Through callous work, I will grow soft.
Matty walks into the ring to I'll not contain you.
Everyone in the arena is just like, what the fuck is this guy's problem? Like, what's going on here? This isn't new metal. This isn't butt rock. What's going on here?
Matty would walk out to fucking Samurai Sword.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Not unironically a badass song to walk out to.
Yeah.
Like, how intimidating, like, holy shit. Like, what are they gonna do to me? Like, that's what I'd be thinking if I was a wrestler and another wrestler was walking out to fight me to Samurai Sword.
I would walk out to Samurai Sword acoustic.
Is there seriously an acoustic version of Samurai Sword?
There is a motherfucking acoustic version of Samurai Sword.
It shouldn't exist.
What does it sound like? Is it like freak folk, or is it like
it's just him and a guitar, and it sounds perfectly normal, and it's just a song.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear.
Insane.
I don't know if I buy it, but I will listen to it after this podcast is over for sure, because I'm very intrigued by Phil's possibly noisiest song done acoustically.
The only place I was able to find it was a YouTube video of these dancing skeletons with it played over that clip.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's Blood is on Spotify also. I think you don't have Spotify, right,
Yeah, I
Alex?
have Apple Music, and I do not believe it is on there.
Yeah, so it is available on Spotify, but I would probably recommend the skeleton version nonetheless. I don't know, that just seems like a good touch. I'm just gonna just to reel it back to the moon here for a second. It's like, what is it with Phil in the goddamn moon? It's like he's on some profound shit about the moon that my like tiny dumb monkey brain can't comprehend. But like, I don't know, just the moon we think is the moon is a hoax, and the real moon is some weird shit that we don't know about. All we know is that our moon is not the real moon. It's, I don't know. That's all I have to say about the moon.
I think the real moon is the physical object, and you can't experience it unless you're on the moon.
I suppose. The real moon is the friends we made along the way.
Which goes along with the no flashlight narrative and kind of like experiencing the night as the night with, no flashlight.
Oh, Matty, you should make your joke about what no flashlight means.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Jake, are you sure? Like,
I
literally told you that joke on the podcast. I was like, I don't know I should say it. I'm just gonna get this out of the way now, so it's out of my head.
No, I want it on here for posterity.
Okay, all right. So the flashlight that Phil Elverum is talking about on this album is no flashlight at all. It's actually a black light. And when he says no flashlight, he means do not shine that black light in my room. Please do not shine it in my room.
Oh my god.
You made me do this, Jake. You made me do this.
I did.
In the interest of full disclosure, I had not heard this before.
No.
I'm so mad, Jake, because I was literally about to talk about the album's like most devastating lyric, and then you make me say this fucking joke.
Well, hey,
but now I can't stop myself.
What's the album's most devastating lyric, Matt?
It's gonna come from the song, I think No Inside, No Out, where he says, being in the world is having scattered ashes. That, in retrospect to some of the material on A Crow Looked at Me, is a very, very, like, oh god. Like I said, I mean, I won't talk about A Crow Looked at Me too much, because again, that's for you guys to talk about whenever the episode comes out. But it's one of those lyrics that in retrospect you just go, oh, this is really, really devastating. It hits a lot more now. Like, oh god.
That's interesting that you bring up that song in particular, No Inside, No Out, because when I was taking notes, that was the only song that I actually just copied and pasted a verse onto it, because the line, because the pupil of my eye is a hole, there's no inside and there's no out. The world is in me and I am in the world. Like, that just gives me some weird, like, acid trip vibes that I really enjoy. I don't know. Do you know what I mean? Like, the pupil is a hole, so, like, I don't know.
Well, again, going back to this, he's kind of searching for a sense of place, and I don't know if we want to look at like where his life was at the time. He had moved to Norway, kind of ditched his entire like friend and art structure, moved to Norway, and then came back after like I don't know how many months, but a while of just like absolute solitude, and makes sense he was in a weird place, makes sense that he's kind of wondering about this stuff, and it doesn't seem like it was an easy transition at all.
Yeah. A lot of I mean, this album as a whole is very dark in a very literal sense. Like, it's about night and the darkness and like the literal absence of light. It's kind of like, I don't know, it's very evocative of like the like really, really early morning, like when everything is sort of quiet and peaceful and you can like sit and think about deep shit like around a campfire. That's just sort of the whole I don't know, that's the sort of feeling that this album kind of keeps giving me over and over again, is like just existing in the night.
What was I gonna say? Like I said, no flashlight. I'm still Matt. I'm Jacob. I'm still very upset. I did not want to say that.
I can, if you want, I can delete.
No, you don't
I
have to
the
cut it.
ultimate
It's very
power.
We do.
It's very good. I don't want you to cut it. It's very good. I don't want you to cut it. But also, like, fuck you for. Look. Here's the thing. It's my fault at the end of the day because I'm the one who said it in the first place.
Hey, you made the joke, man.
I made the joke, so I can't really do anything about it. But as I stated, we briefly talked about it because I was like, this is one of my favorite songs. The Universe is Shown, but like I said, he just bangs those pots and pans and just has that trombone. I'm just like, damn, this just speaks so much to me.
You really did that. That is what it sounds like. Well done.
Yep.
Honestly, it's kind of fun. The trombone is like, it's like some kind of like comedic villain, because it's like he's like having a conversation with it within the song. It's like, but I had some other plans for the night, like an exclamation point, and then the trombone is like, like it's like the parents and it's like all the adults in the Peanuts,
Yeah, it kind of is. I actually resent the trombone as an instrument, because when I was in 6th grade, we were required to take band class, and I really wanted to play the trumpet, but too many kids signed up for the trumpet, and since they like delegated the instruments alphabetically by last name, and my last name starts with a W, the trumpet positions were already filled, and so the band teacher forced me to play the trombone, which is a dumb instrument to play, and I hated it, and then I quit band in like 6 months.
So Phil Elverum, whenever you eventually reissue this album, just take out the trombone.
Take out the trombone.
We fucking hate the trombone here at the Indieheads podcast, folks.
Here's what Phil should do. He should consult 100 gecs and be like, what should I replace the trombone with? And they'll come up with something, and it'll all be okay.
You know what's so funny though is that I think I said earlier in the week, or maybe it was a couple weeks ago, that Pre-Human Ideas by Mount Eerie walked so that 1000 gecs could run.
Oh God, I knew where you were going with that. I hate it. I really hate it.
You hate it because it's the truth.
It is the truth.
So I'm on the podcast Twitter right now, as one does. And apparently there is some narrative of me, Lil Brexit, winning the Iowa caucuses. And honestly, I never knew. This is the first time I'm learning of this.
Yeah, good job, bud. You did it.
Thanks.
Like I said, see, because of course we thought that of course we thought at first, okay, oh shit, the Pete Buttigieg, did he steal the Iowa caucus? No, Dill actually won the Iowa caucus, but then the results actually came out, and it showed that little Brexit had won literally all the precincts, including the satellite caucuses, for the Iowa caucus. Like I said, just completely came out of nowhere.
You didn't expect it. I wasn't on the ballot. I didn't even think I was running for president, but I guess I am.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you gotta go to New Hampshire now, man. You got a town hall coming up. You gotta
gotta
people that want to talk to you.
What they want.
Well, here's the important question: will you be President Brexit or President Lil Brexit?
Interesting.
It's a lot to think about. You'll have to decide before the town hall.
Yeah, and that's an interesting question, because Pusha T went from Pusha T to President Push. And he became president of the Good Music record label.
Exactly.
Much to think about. Although, if I was President Brexit, they would call me Mr. Brexit, which, as we know, is a taboo name, an illegal name we cannot respect. So I think it would be President Lil Brexit.
Okay. Well then,
Man, Brexit is like a thing that like actually happened. Like Britain is no longer a part of the European Union. That's fucking nuts.
This is true.
It's gonna. It's one of those. Sorry, I know this is an album about Phil Elverum and not about politics, but it feels like one of those moments that's just like, oh, dude, global politics is going to fucking collapse in the very near future. Like this is one of those moments where you're just like, okay, like why is nobody freaking out about this? Because like this could like really fuck up the entire. Like I said, the recession. It happens every decade, and I feel like it's like okay, it's been like 12 years since the financial crisis. It's like we're getting to that time, right, where this sort of thing is supposed to happen, or are we good for the rest of our lives? I don't know. I don't know. But anyways,
I can
We're in a
segue it
rocky
back.
place.
I have
let's
a good
segue it
segue.
back.
Brexit? What? How? That's it. That's the segue.
Okay, actually, I'm really curious what version of this album you listened to, because the one that I listened to was the 2015 reissue on Spotify. That's the album I know, but I was checking on Genius the lyrics, and the track listing is like completely different. There might be songs that I've never even heard that are on this album.
So I'm pretty sure what that is the reissue, the physical reissue has like 3 or 4 bonus tracks or something like that. But the original version and the version on Spotify they should be the same. So the one that's on Spotify like is the original normal version.
Okay, gotcha.
But speaking of what and how, those are songs on the album, and they're pretty good. How is actually I was kind of surprised I didn't realize this before, but it's like the song "Let's Get Out of the Romance," which has sort of been like retooled a few times throughout the Phil Elverum discography, actually shows up. Like instead of "Let's Get Out of the Romance," though, it's what is the lyric? "How do I live with the romance?" or something like that. But it's the same harmony and the same sort of like song structure does show up on an actual LP here. So that's interesting.
You see some kind of reflection about
his
separation from
this album.
the world.
I'm very. It is the transitional album between Mount Eerie and the Microphones. I mean, really, I guess it's just. I mean, like I said, Mount Eerie and No Flashlight. Those are really the transitional albums. But this one especially is just sort of like, I mean, as you guys were discussing earlier, it just seems like kind of a weird push and pull. It does make me wonder why this was the one he decided to go as Mount Eerie, because it still sounds like the Microphones a lot. There's still a lot of similarities in terms of the like at times really blown out production, some of the more occasional noisy tracks. It's not the more folk. He's not quite to the folksy sound he would get to.
I think. So I think it kind of just commemorates his, like radical personal changes and also like he's stopped making music in the way that he was like with that group of people. I think he moved to a different studio. Like it kind of it seems like the Microphones is as much like a time and a place as it is like a band.
Yeah, right. And kind of building off of that, I obviously can't speak for Phil. I feel like he would probably say something to the effect of like they're like at the end of the day there really isn't a difference between the two. It is sort of just Phil kind of all the way through. Like even the Glow Part 2 or whatever is like, pretty much just Phil.
90% him, if not.
And so like
98.
Whatever kind of like distinctions you can make between the two monikers is probably sort of just like I don't know, you could probably say it's like a confirmation bias type of thing. Like we have the cutoff, so now it's like let's try to find like the differences. But I do still see what you're saying. Like this definitely like it kind of is evocative of both sides of the spectrum here.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, like, just kind of scrolling through here, like if there's any songs we haven't sort of really mentioned. It's one thing. There's 2 songs on here actually called "No Flashlight," which is something that he does a lot, like just having 2 songs on the album with the same name. And the second No Flashlight is actually one of my favorite songs in here, so I kind of want to at least just give it a shout out. It starts with Rainfall Baby, which is, something that is on a lot of Mount Eerie albums, just like the literal sounds of like weather and rain. And I don't know, I've always thought that the guitar in this song was especially beautiful, and it's got the whole kind of like, I don't know, he just always does this thing where like elements will sort of sporadically pop in and out, and it's just sort of like a tornado of different sounds happening. But I like the line, saying no flashlight is saying yes to everything else. What does it mean?
I mean, in general, I said, I guess we can go to like sort of the ending of the album with No Flashlight Part 2 into Two Moons, because the lyrics in No Flashlight, I mean, like I said, it's one of those. This is like one of those albums that, like, thankfully, this is not Phil Elverum's last album. It is far from his last album. It is not his last album. It's far from it. But you could definitely get that feeling that, like, oh, he could have easily just like gone away to the woods and never made another album ever again. Like, that would have been like. There's times in this album where it's like very much like, oh, this is it. Like, this might be the final time we hear Phil Elverum. Like not even in a way of like, it's more of a way of just like, oh, he's still gonna be alive. He's just gonna disappear and just no longer make music. Like he just has different priorities in his life.
Yeah.
I actually do have some input on the flashlight line and
yeah,
like being with everything else. I think it's just a line about kind of being present in your world, and I mean that should be clear, but I don't know. I personally feel a strong connection with that line, like, just as, and obviously this is very different from the world that Phil wrote that line in, but just as someone who, struggles with, like, being on the internet all the time and actually paying attention to what's around you and
yeah.
I think he's just very literally expressing, like, elementally being with the night and his surroundings, and
exactly,
and kind of letting everything else lie,
Yeah, like, don't use a flashlight, experience the dark and experience the night, and, like, I don't know, which is basically the yes to everything else part of that.
If there's a fire, you have to go inside.
Yeah, and that actually kind of reminds me of another song on here, the whole Stop Singing, which is again a sort of a point that he's been kind of, I feel like, trying to hammer home on the last few albums we've talked about. There's this idea of, like, the spaces left when we stop singing or whatever. I think that's sort of a kind of similar sentiment actually to the No Flashlight thing, and I think it kind of, I don't know, it kind of like clears it up in a way.
This is a great album. This is a really great album. It is not discussed how great of an album this is. That was, doing this, getting ready for this podcast just made me realize, like, wow, this album really does not get its due credit within Phil's discography.
I agree. It's definitely one of his most mysterious albums. It's kind of like, I don't know, no one really talks about it. Phil doesn't really mention it that much. Not that he ever really sort of mentions his like body of work retroactively, but still, so it's like
it did get,
it did get a reissue.
A reissue, and it's
That's
not
true.
just an ordinary reissue. Like, he redid the mixing and the mastering. He changed these songs, so clearly it has some level of pertinence to him.
Yeah.
Or at least it did. Like, clearly this album was more significant in some way than some of the others.
It's sort of like it's almost like a thesis statement of Mount Eerie. Like, I feel like a lot of the stuff that he would go on to explore, a lot of the more kind of, I guess you could, quote unquote, philosophical themes, just the kind of like mysterious, like spiritual, introspective universe kind of stuff, is definitely something that would go on to characterize a lot of his albums in the future, especially like Wind's poem through like Sana is a lot of this sort of like Zen being in the moment, in the universe kind of stuff. And this is sort of, I feel like, the first real tangible taste of that. I guess you could argue Mount Eerie is, but this one definitely feels more concretely like Mount Eerie to me.
He kind of expressed a lot of thoughts and struggle with this in the Dawn Journal book, which we'll talk about a little bit later.
Yes.
As of the announcement, I mean, I guess as of this podcast, I wasn't sure if you guys talked about it on the last one. Phil's playing Rhode Island like really, really soon, right, Alex?
I have 3 tickets.
Okay, I wasn't sure if you were going. I assumed you were going.
And our close friend of the pod, Male Culture, who was nearly on a podcast, but that went awry. Awry.
I'm gonna need some updates re that concert.
Yes.
And we can even do like a little mini, I don't know, or at least we'll discuss it on whatever the closest episode is.
I'll definitely be down to get on and do like an interlude or something. Just talk about the show, break it down.
We already kind of talked at length about this in the previous episode, but I'm curious to hear Matty's perspective on this, and it's that we think that there might be new Mount Eerie material on the way. Not confirmed. It's still 100% conjecture, but it is in the realm of possibility that he will be debuting new Mount Eerie material, which is an exciting prospect.
The thing about these shows is it seems almost guaranteed that he is either performing old material or new material, both of which in many ways feels kind of impossible. Because,
exactly.
We know that he doesn't want to do the death songs anymore. He's not going to be doing Crow Looked at Me and Now Only, and Julie isn't going to be on the tour, so he's not going to be doing Lost Wisdom Part 2, which rules out the last 3 albums, which means either he's going back to those old songs, which he's also expressed not wanting to perform anymore because they just felt irrelevant to him, but that could have changed in the intervening years. Or he has somehow already written new material in spite of the insane 3 albums in 3 years hot streak. Not just 3 albums in 3 years. These are like clear, polished works too. No disrespect to the cause, but Mark Kozelek has an insane output, but his work also kind of reflects that in a way.
That's definitely, I guess, that kind of approach to making and writing songs is something that defines Mark Kozelek's music, but to me it feels like more something that is sort of utilized in Phil's music in a way. I don't think he would be able necessarily to kind of employ those songwriting habits and release at such a prolific rate in the same way. But I think that kind of that songwriting strategy as a whole would allow him to at least have another album ready at this point, I think.
Yeah.
So who knows?
And also, I think one thing to consider is that he did do a show recently as the Microphones.
That's true.
Yeah,
That's true.
There is a small possibility that if he's doing old work, we could hear like I Felt Your Shape or I Want Wind to Blow, because those are just songs that he like has kind of continued to play throughout his career, which is really uncommon. Not with any regularity, don't get me wrong.
He's just gonna play like side C
once
and
every
D
few,
of the Glow Part 2.
Once every few years, like they pop up in a set list, which is uncommon.
He's played I Want Wind to Blow recently, and I think he's played the Glow Part 2 recently as well. And maybe I Felt Your he did it. I think the show Matty's referring to, he did a show under the name of the Microphones.
Right. You just meant as the Microphones. Yeah, he did perform several tracks, but
Yeah.
he did I Felt Your Shape at one of the concerts with Julie Dwarin.
Oh, nice. Did she sing on it as well?
I don't know how that worked. Maybe it was like right before they started their tour, and so it was kind of mixing it out. But
another
I know
thing
that he performed that last year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. 'Cause yeah, I know when I mean, this is sort of going back to the what he'll be performing. When Matty and I saw him live, that was probably a few years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
He played like pretty much the entirety of Now Only, but it was like 9 months before Now Only came out.
Yeah.
So it is, I don't know. It's pilot testing new songs is definitely something that he is sort of known to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then also, I mean, like I said, of course, there's that, and apparently, like Lost Wisdom Part 2 was, I mean, you'll discuss it whenever that episode comes. It was written very, very quickly. Like I think he just set up a date with like Julie to record, and then he just didn't have any songs, and then all of a sudden, they just kind of came to him, and then he had songs for the album.
Exactly.
So it's very possible that's the case. But I mean, like I said, for the future of Phil going forward, I mean, like, so we can't get too that too much because you guys are still about. Are you guys even halfway through this series right now?
We're not quite, but we're getting.
There's no way. Yeah, there's no way we're over halfway, but we're maybe like close to halfway.
That's what I thought. I'm like, okay,
mean,
you can't have that much more to
chronologically,
discuss.
this is only his 5th studio album, and he has released 10 as Mount Eerie, and this is only the first as Mount Eerie. So I would say we are definitely not halfway through.
Some are going to be clumped together. Dawn and Lost Wisdom will be clumped together, as well as Clear Moon and Ocean Roar will be clumped together.
Yeah, but we will have a couple more interlude episodes as well.
Yeah.
that weren't accounted for on the original schedule, like talking about some of the live videos out there, like Fog Movies, and also we're gonna hopefully talk about his photography, and next week we're gonna do an interlude episode because I just have too much going on. So yeah, we've got a lot to do.
And I suppose now would be a good time to like, are there any lingering thoughts about No Flashlight before we wrap this bad boy up and send it off?
I mean, like I said, I think I said it all. I said this is a really good album. Definitely deserves a reevaluation within the larger critical sphere. And I'm just gonna say this now because I won't be on any of the next episodes. I think this is probably my one and only appearance for this Phil Elverum Discog breakdown, and I'm just gonna say this now because of course the next one, I think Dawn was mostly written in Norway, and maybe the one after that. Am I correct?
Dawn was written, in that.
Okay,
time.
so what? So okay.
But
so I will say this.
Lost Wisdom is kind of a play on those songs, and then after that is Wind's Poem, which I don't know enough about to say when it was written.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so consider this. Okay, so Norway, all right, Norway. Well, what if it was Norgay and it was just for the fellas?
Oh God.
Consider that.
Thank you,
I've
Matty,
considered it.
For those lovely and elegant last words on No Flashlight.
Yes. And if there is nothing else to touch on for No Flashlight, then also thank you, Matty, for appearing on this episode with us today.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely a different dynamic than when it's just us two.
I brought a chaotic energy to the
I was
fold.
Gonna say this is gonna be the chaotic evil one of our episodes, but
yeah,
and I'm glad
be.
for it.
I came in with no notes, and Matty said the things he said.
Yeah. Well, There's somewhere in this 1 hour, 41 minutes, and 25 seconds and counting, somewhere in there contains a thoughtful discussion on No Flashlight. You just have to work for it.
Yeah. I mean, that's not the length of the pod, though. Also,
That's
I
true.
joined the call late, and my call is only 1 hour and 18 minutes long. So
okay.
It's not. We aren't too bad. It would have been really strange if this episode ended up being longer than the Glow Part 2.
Yeah, right? Yeah, true. All right, well, I guess that about does it then, right?
Yeah, sure. All right. Goodbye now.
Good. Yes.